Okay, so again, good morning, good evening, and I'm really delighted that so many people from so many different time zones joined my talk here today because we will go on a big, big journey through the legends of early Freemasonry. And basically, we will start in the 15th century and we'll follow it all the way down to what we call Freemasonry nowadays. For my talk, I have three main goals. First, when we talk about Freemasonry, we somehow think about the unified experience that was somehow similar over time. But Masonry is such an old phenomenon, it went over centuries, so we will look into the differences in experience. Maybe some of you guys can mute yourself. I will do it quickly during the call because I have some double up audio here. Okay, cool. I will just mute some persons. Okay, cool. Better now. Yeah, we will follow the way Freemasonry took with the differences in experience, and I will rather provide topics for further studies today, because we won't be able to look into the depths of each piece of puzzle which I will present here today. It's a long way we will took. Further, I want to provide a perspective on the potentially first non-craft symbol that entered Freemasonry, and this is actually, as I see it, the Rosy Cross. So how did this all happen? Even the Rose+Croix, to be honest, is one of my favorite degrees, especially the later French version of it. Done right, it's one of the most spiritual degrees in Freemasonry, so I even have a pelican tattoo of my left arm, which is a symbol that joined Freemasonry later on as well, and we will see in the end when and why and how this happens. So for my talk, we have three parts. The first part makes up like 70 to 80% of the whole thing, I would say. There we will look at the beginning, so at everything that boiled together to become the premier Grand Lodge of England in its early days. And in part 2 and 3, we will look into the reactions at what happened there, how people viewed it, if they were happy, if they were not happy, and especially what were the reactions. You see it already, early high degrees, additional degrees popped up. So something had to have happened which made them pop up. And the part 3 is a little glimpse into the further developments. There won't be much time for it now, but of course I will draw a little line to the Scottish Rite. So let's start with part 1. When I joined Freemasonry, they told me the old story. And the old story basically goes like, yes, Freemasonry was working solely operative, just working with stones, building cathedrals, building churches. Here you have a beautiful image of a man and a woman building a church. Yeah, and then the old story continues. It says basically the church ran out. Sorry? Okay. Better now? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah. The old story basically goes that there were operative lodges just working on stone, and basically the church ran out of money because of several wars and other things. So more and more gentlemen, masons, joined these operative lodges. That's how Freemasonry was viewed long time. Here you see alias Ashmole. And the more of these gentlemen joined the old lodges, the more their character has changed, and suddenly they started working in a speculative way. This is partly true, maybe, but for most parts it's completely wrong, and we will see soon why. Because to make it short, the distinction is much too hard. To say there were operative times and then speculative times doesn't look at the operative times in a proper way, because they were doing symbolic and speculative things, of course, as well. And then normally the story continues. I literally heard it today from another Masonic lodge too, that this pure system of Freemasonry with its 3 degrees somehow reached France, and then in France it exploded. They added a lot of new degrees. Here you see something with Rosicrucian topics, there you see Kabbalistic topics, and here certain teams of knighthood were entered in France because the French are like this. If you ask them why it happened in France, they tell you the French are like this, they want it like this. Yeah, there are some issues with the old story. The first one, here goes was pointed out by a guy called Stevenson. He published this study about Scottish Freemasonry in 1988 originally, and he says the stonemasons in their operative lodges were doing speculative things long before gentlemen non-stonemasons came on the scene, and this is so true. I give you a first little example of it. We will look into the details in a bit. Here you have a square which was found in the, or discovered in the foundation of a bridge in Limerick in Ireland. And it dates back to 1507. You can see it here, there's the year. And look what's written on it. It says, I will strive to live with love and care upon the level and by the square. Does this ring a bell? I mean, for me, it sounds almost like our rituals nowadays. How shall we act? How shall we meet? How shall we part? And that's 1507. So clearly before any gentleman mason entered the scene. I'm with Stevenson on this point, and there are some other issues with the old story too. We have a rich building lodge culture that predates Elias Ashmole, Sir Robert Murray, and all the other guys by far. And then I struggle with the influence. Yeah, they say more and more gentlemen masons joined these early lodges, and they changed the character of the lodges. There's an issue with the theory because neither Elias Ashmole, nor Sir Robert Murray, nor the others actually came back to the lodges. Yeah, they were initiated, and they were once or twice visiting these lodges again. And last point, of course, the earliest high degrees, we will see, clearly not French. So when I say we have a rich building lodge culture that predates club-like Freemasonry, which happened in London in the 18th century, what I mean are the Regius poem or the so-called Halliwell manuscript. They mostly named after the last owner of the manuscripts, from 1425, the Cook manuscript from 1450, and the Grand Lodge No. 1 from 1583. The first ones are so-called Gothic constitutions. The other one, when I look at the time, it's hard to say it's Gothic. It's rather a Renaissance, to be honest. But what did they contain? And now it gets really interesting. Yeah, when you read books about them today or papers, they are viewed as mythological accounts to the craft. So basically, they tell you the history of the craft and of the seven sciences, how they developed over time, but in a complete mythological way. So they are viewed as mere myths and mere mythology, nothing more. And we think this is a complete misunderstanding of the experience back then. Because nowadays we have history, nowadays we have cultural history, nowadays we have natural history. Back then they didn't have those points of view. Rather, the way of telling history at the time was limited to the frame of Christian salvation history. And now something really interesting comes. The world appeared in clear eons or ages of the salvation history. That's how the world was viewed back then. German philosopher of history, Lucien Hölscher, says you can imagine it like a French Baroque garden. Yeah, a French Baroque garden has walls around it, as you can see here. There's no open horizon anywhere to see, and no open past. Instead, what you had, the world was started with Adam, then there came Noah or the flood, then we had Abraham, Moses, the first temple, the second temple, and the birth of Christ. And what people were expecting in the future was actually no future. They didn't even use the word. We will see it in a second. They were expecting apocalyptic things to happen, the end of history. So there wasn't an open world like we have it today, an open horizon or a way of telling history. This was the frame of reference where you perceived yourself and where you perceived the whole world in it. Nowadays it looks differently. Nowadays it's rather like an English landscape garden with an open horizon. You have different ideologies, yeah, from for example, here you go with communism, there is socialism, there is idealism, there is liberalism, humanism, feminism, and so on. So nowadays you move into different secular ideas, and therefore the horizon seems open and time seems open. This wasn't the case back then. Here we had the clear wars of the Christian salvation history. And even though there were big wars going on, even thousands and hundreds of people died of famine and diseases, the usual orders stayed in place. So the great architect was looking from the bel etage of the castle over his 7 ages of the world and put the kings and kingdoms in place, and everything somehow stood stable until 1600, we can say, until basically Martin Luther, Reformation, Galilei, Kepler, and others changed the view of the world. And that's something we actually can prove. This is not just a story. I'm not sure if you know Google Books Ngram Viewer, but what Google did is they digitalized all kind of literature which was published going back to 1500. And you can enter some keywords above, and it shows you the percentage these words were used in the literature of a certain year. So it clearly shows you peaks of interest for certain topics. And now it gets a bit crazy. I know this is hard to grasp, yeah? The word future wasn't present in literature until 1600, we can say. People started to think about the future in a kind of secular way around 1600. That's where the Rosicrucian legends popped up as well. Before it was rather Christian mysticism and other things completely within the Christian salvation history. Here it became a bit more secular, but it took still 100 years or 150 years to high enlightenment that words like progress entered the scene. Yeah, before the world stood like still, the normal orders always were the same. That was Christian salvation history. And then when all the isms popped up, Karl Marx, Adam Smith, and the others, we got ideas about development. This followed in the 19th century. And the same is with history. Yeah, without a secular view on the past as something old and something to overcome, you don't have the concept of history as we have it nowadays. You see, history entered the scene around 1750. I have somehow really loud noise here. I will try to, okay. So when we have a world which look completely different. They perceive themselves in a clear, small frame as if inside of a French Baroque garden. So nothing changed. It stood like still. That's how they perceive themselves. What's interesting here is, for example, when we look at 1723, when Anderson wrote the first constitutions of Freemasonry. And nowadays they smile about it and say, well, Anderson dates back Freemasonry back to Adam, the first human. And of course, he can't go back the first human when he wants to date it very back. But he didn't had another frame of reference to. He didn't had this concept of history as we have it now. He perceived himself solely within Christian salvation history, and this was his frame of reference. Yeah, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Solomon, Cyrus, and the birth of Christ. And of course, he told the history of Freemasonry in a similar way. And the same thing is what we have in the Regius poem. Yeah, we have a big part that tells the history of the craft within Christian salvation history. And of course, in the end, we have some stuff like charges, and I love this one, for example. It says, each one shall teach the other and love together as sister and brother. And I think that's what we are doing here right now. So what these old Gothic constitutions contained were, on the one hand, a mythological, we call it mythological account of the craft. They viewed it as history, and some charges and things about how we shall act and behave. The Cook manuscript is quite similar. It's not a poem, it's a prosa text compared to the Regius poem. So it's a bit more elaborated. Here we read about Noah's flood again. It says that all knowledge of the sciences and the craft were written on 2 pillars made of stone, that they survived the flood. And after the flood, these 2 pillars were found by 2 guys, one called Pythagoras, the other one Hermes Trismegistus. And once they found these pillars, they started to teach the craft and sciences again, and then they followed the way until where we are now, basically. So this is the account these old documents give about Freemasonry. And the Grand Lodge number 1 is already a much more elaborated thing. It has a clear structure. It starts with an opening prayer, the wisdom of the glorious Son and the grace of God, Amen. Then it tells you in the intro what is this document about. The purpose is to tell you how and in what manner this worthy craft of masonry was first begun, and afterwards kept and upheld by kings and princes and other worshipful men. Then follows a section with charges to and an explanation of the 7 liberal sciences. And this is basically the structure of this document. We have to keep this a little bit in mind because it becomes important very soon. What I can tell here already is that the Grand Lodge number 1 was transcribed very often. For example, when a very important person entered the craft or a lodge, when it was initiated, as well as during times of salary negotiation, for example. So during salary negotiations, it was obviously cool to prove the antiquity of the craft, to have a better negotiation position. But so keep this a little bit in mind. It becomes interesting in a second. Yeah. So for the short summary, what we have right now is we have a rich building lodge culture. We have clearly seen there were moral values assigned to working tools long before Elias Ashmole and other guys were born. And we have a mythological craft history which was present in medieval building huts. And then something happened in Scotland. Probably you've heard of this guy, William Shaw. He gave an institutional structure to masonry in Scotland because Protestantism, the Reformation hit Scotland late, but it hit Scotland hard. Basically, every churches had to be rebuilt. Also, a lot of other buildings had to be built up. So a guy named William Shaw was appointed Master of Works and Warden of the Masons, as you can read here below on this document. Basically, what he did is giving this institutionalized structure to this loose system of building huts. He told them to keep records, to keep their minute books. He put charges in place and other things. And one thing is in particular of interest, because William Shaw is a man of the late Renaissance, which means he can be viewed as a Vitruvian architect. This was his ideal world image of an architect. And this means they were not just knowing stuff about the materials or geometry. They were actually after what we call universal knowledge. Yeah, he looked into fields like geometry, history, philosophy, music, even medicine and law. So all this was combined in this person. And a must-read, of course, was the Corpus Hermeticum with stories about Hermes Trismegistus and topics like cosmology, theology, spirituality, and so on. And what this guy wrote in the Second Statutes, 1599, made historians really eager to find out what happened there and what he could mean with it. He writes the sentence that apprentices and fellow crafts of a lodge must tak trial of ye art of memory. And this means nothing else than pass examinations in the art of memory. And for me here, speculative masonry or symbolic masonry starts already. I will tell you why. The art of memory was initially just a way to remember speeches, to remember big orations, initially taught by or used by Cicero, the Roman guy, a big Roman orator. I'm wondering how the manuscript of his De Oratore ended up in the British Museum, like everything else ended up at the British Museum too. Basically what he did is to learn a speech, he was picturing a building in his mind, creating a memory temple, and then he was thinking about the different sections of his speech, and each section made up a certain room in his memory temple, in the building he was imagining in his mind. And so if he first linked the rooms to the section of his speech, and then he put interior inside the rooms. And for example, when he then gave the speech, he walked through this memory temple in his mind, and maybe when he was seeing a big picture with heroic content, he remembered, okay, I should tell something now about the king, for example. He just used this to remember speeches. In architecture, it became really interesting because cathedrals nowadays are actually witnesses of their master builders' art of memory, because they are not memory temples, they are real temples. And here you have the Cologne Cathedral, and you can really imagine the master builder once walking through it, looking up, picturing the heavenly Jerusalem, and every arch and every figure and every structure would be linked to certain stories in his mind when he was creating this beautiful piece of architecture. That's the art of memory, how it was used in building cathedrals. Now, when William Shaw was using the art of memory, what we think he meant were the catechisms and the images the catechisms create in our minds. Because what the catechism does, it creates the symbol of a lodge in our mind, and there puts a lot of symbols and ideas in it. Yeah, how stands your lodge east and west as the temple of Jerusalem? Are there any lights in your lodge? Yes, there are lights in my lodge. Are there any pillars in your lodge? Yes, there are pillars, other symbols, and so on. So basically, in our mind, we create a memory temple full of symbols, full of ideas, and when we walk through this memory temple, all these truths, ideas, values come up again and offer different perspectives. So this is something that happened already in Scotland, probably not in the same way as we perceive it nowadays, but as the very earliest, around 1600 in Scotland, we have traces of it, of catechisms in use. So this is something what happened here. So let's add this to our short list. We have a rich building lodge culture, a lot of late Renaissance stuff, and the art of memory within the institutionalized masonry in Scotland. That's the internal things, and already this would be enough to show, okay, from this on, masonry, it's just one step away. But as masonry is an old phenomenon, it's not enough to look at the internal things, because those are all internal things. We have to look at the external perception of masonry as well. Even though the lodges were really gated communities, with high gatekeeper functions, it was really expensive to join them. They had passwords and secret signs and so on. So they were closed on the one hand, but on the other hand, new generations joined them over time. And the new generations, they were influenced by the external views about masonry. That's why we have to check them as well. And here we are already with the Rosicrucians. Do you remember the Mason word? I used it in the slide before. It was used for the catechisms, the early catechisms. They called Mason word. And of course, they use it for the password of each degree. And now look at this. This is a poem. Maybe some of you know it. 1638 is an external account about masonry, how it was perceived at the time, and it's a bit crazy, I know. For what we do, prestige is not in gross. What we do is like not openly and not public. For we be brethren of the Rosy Cross. We have the Mason word and second sight, things for to come we can foretell aright. So they were able to look in the future. Tell you the future, because they have the Mason word and something like brethren of the Rosy Cross. How the hell did this happen? That's interesting, isn't it? So this suddenly popped up. We are even still 100 years before the Premier Grand Lodge in London. The Rosy Cross is actually initially just a little story written. No, where does the symbol come from initially? Maybe we start like this. Initially, it was the symbol by Martin Luther, the guy who did the Reformation. His seal was a white rose, and on top there was a red cross. It was also the family seal of a student back then, I think it was in Tübingen, called Johann Valentin Andrea. His family seal contained a St. Andrew's cross and 4 roses. So he used it in small booklets that he published as handwritings just as a student. The first handwriting he created was the chemical wedding, actually, 1606. And 1608, he and maybe some other guys wrote first the Fama Fraternitas and then the Confessio later the year. So this was 1608. They started to spread around the handwritings. Later they were printed, and he wasn't actually happy about this anymore because he wasn't a student anymore. He was about to get married when the first ones appeared, and he was about to get a job as big clergyman in his area. So he wasn't really happy that this writing suddenly made the rounds, because what he wrote in it was a beautiful account of the world back then. As we already a little bit looked into it, before the world was quite stable with regard to the orders and perception and experience. They experienced themselves solely within Christian salvation history. But Martin Luther happened and did the first Reformation of the church. And what these guys now wanted, they wanted a secular Reformation, if you want. Secular is a too strong word. But they were talking about a general Reformation. They didn't want to have just this Reformation of the church anymore. They wanted to have a Reformation of the society as well. Because what they were seeing is a world that gets more and more empiric, a world that is, empiric, as I said. Galilei provided telescopes for everyone. Kepler provided new views on the movements of the planets and so on. And Martin Luther let the church break into parts here in Europe. So they were in fear that we somehow lose the inner meaning. Yeah, sciences became more empiric, the world more segregated and fragmented. So where is the unity? Where is the inner meaning? And they thought, okay, if we put an alchemical spiritual Christianity in it, in the name of Paracelsus and others, we could keep this ideal society up. And that was the idea of a general Reformation, providing unity in a more and more segregated society. I think that's the initial idea of Rosicrucianism. And for me, it still is. Yeah, when I see Rosicrucian symbols in Freemasonry, for me, it's about keeping up unity, keeping up inner meanings in a big, more and more segregated and fragmented world. This hit completely the interest of the time. Yeah, it wasn't just in Germany where this was published. It caused actually hundreds of reactions, especially in the UK, especially in Germany. In France, rather later. So in the beginning, just negative ones. They said, okay, they don't exist. There is no secret brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, because that's what Johann Valentin wrote in this text. He said, we are a secret brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. We want to do a general reformation of society, and we were founded by a guy called Christian Rosenkreuz, who lived back then in the 14th century up to the 15th century. If you know a bit about Kabbalah and you see the alleged birth dates and date of death of this guy, you see already he might not be a real historic person. So it started as writings of a student, and it soon became this. Yeah, this is an Englishman, Robert Flood. The first writing about the Rosicrucians were basically the one on the left, published 1617. It's defense writing, because people were speaking about the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross everywhere. Even it was just a term in literature, as we think nowadays, mostly. I know some people view him as a historic figure, and it's totally fine to do so if it makes you feel better. But what we can see, even if he was just a figure in literature, it caused strong reactions. So the first one was the defense writing. He said, no, they are good Christians, because that was a bit in doubt. As Christian Rosenkreuz in this short booklet valued, for example, Eastern philosophy, Arabic philosophy, and traveled through North Africa, got knowledge there, and all this knowledge was valued. So people were not sure if this is cool, what's written there. And even though Johann Valentin wrote just short booklets, rather mythical accounts, what happened here, Robert Flood did a kind of scientific system out of it. I could already lecture 1 or 2 hours just about the image in the middle. He created a strong Rosicrucian system, and about the earth and about unity in the earth. And the one on the left, on the right, is probably known to many of you. It's the famous seven-folded rose by Robert Flood. Before, roses were mainly five-folded because of the 5 points of the cross, because of the 5 wounds of Jesus Christ. Here we have a seven-folded rose because it's already a bit secular, a bit more into worldliness. It stands for the 7 planets, the 7 metals, and so on. And above the writing, the rose gives the bee honey. So what we can say is it caused strong reactions. And somehow everyone was speaking about the Rosy Cross as the symbol of a secret brotherhood. And that's something what happened in this short poem here as well, yeah? We can't deny it. And somehow it was linked to the Mason word. And I was asking myself, how the hell was it linked to the Mason word? And it's quite easy. You have to look where it was published. And this is 70 kilometers north of Edinburgh in Scotland. There we have the Hunting Tower Castle. A nice thing, isn't it? Let's look inside. Those images were put up there around 1600. Yeah, we have a hare as a rabbit as a symbol for fertility and rebirth and change. This could be the lion eating a sun, so clear alchemical symbols were there as well, lilies, archangels, and so on. So what we could see inside of the castle was already big, strong occult and alchemical interest. Those images were put there around 1600, 1604, shortly after the Rosicrucian legends hit this area too. And what we had as well, probably a building hut next to the Hunting Tower Castle, where people knew, okay, they celebrate catechisms in the lodge, they have secret words, secret signs, and now suddenly the story about the Rosicrucians pops up in your area, and what you do as a man of the time, of course, you write a poem in it, and you interlink all these stories together. This is just an external view. This is just folklore. This is just a legend, yeah, about people having the second sight, can foretell the future, but Masonry and Rosy Cross linked together by people in the field, not by members of the lodges yet. And what we can say, even if we view him just a literary figure of literature, Christian Rosenkreuz started to collect his fraternity around him. And now this is all prior to the foundation of the Grand Lodge in London. So I think it's fair to say that this strong distinction in speculative and operative Freemasonry doesn't make sense at all. It's not a single turning point in history, it's rather a broad spectrum, and lodges operated on it more or less as same as individual Masons did it all the time. That's a lot of theory. We now make it a little bit more practical. Does this ring a bell? It starts with an opening prayer. It's a manuscript as well. It starts with an opening prayer. It tells you the purpose of the document, so to tell you the history of the craft, then charges and the 7 sciences. Yes, of course, this is a transcript of the Grand Lodge #1 manuscript. It's not a word-by-word transcript. You see on the opening prayer, the amen is missing. The worshipful men became just worthy men here. The charges in plural became singular. The 7 liberal sciences became 7 ideal sciences. But in general, it's a transcript. Also, sometimes mythological figures changed a bit. Hiram at some stage popped up, and so on and so on. But what's interesting is the guy who made this transcript. He's called Edward Sankey, and he did it on the 16th of October, 1646. And this date might already ring a bell for some of the people here. But another thing which we found out is Edward Sankey was the son of Richard Sankey, and Richard Sankey was a gentleman, a landowner in Warrington. You may ask, how is this at all relevant? Yeah, but keep it in mind, please, 16th October, Richard Sankey and Warrington, because we have another document which lays in London as well. This is a diary, and probably some people know this. What we can read here, we have the date. Oh, it's the same date as the transcript was done. We have even a time here, 4:30 p.m. And what's written here is, I was made a Freemason at Warrington. Oh, that's the place where the transcript was done. And then he writes who was present, I transcribed it, and who was present was Mr. Richard Sankey. So Mr. Richard Sankey was present when someone was made a Freemason at Warrington at 4:30 p.m. at 1646. Interesting, isn't it? So someone joined the craft, they did a beautiful transcript of this old constitution, and this is the diary of no one else than Elias Ashmole. So this allows us to link these two occasions together. Yeah, we have first the diary of Elias Ashmole, who says, I was made a Freemason here. Then we have found at another place, but we can link it by the guy who transcribed it, a copy of the constitutions. Yeah, and if you ask yourself, why did Elias Ashmole, the collector of so many things, joined a Masonic lodge. If you ask me, he joined it, when you read his diary, he joined it because he was in search for something like the Rosicrucians. He's always described as a big and heavy Rosicrucian, but that's not the case. He was desperately in search for the Rosicrucians. He wanted to find them. And I think in this Masonic lodge, he didn't find them because a month later or two, he founded actually a kind of Rosicrucian society himself. Um, the interesting thing is that we can link these documents now together. And from other early catechisms, we know what happened back then. So what happened when Elias Ashmole joined the Masonic lodge? Yeah, you can imagine a big festive board. They have good food. They have a lot of pints. They have a lot of drinks, maybe wine, maybe no beer. I don't know what they drank. But we know that it started with questions and answers from the catechisms with a lot of drinks and toasts in between. Then suddenly Elias Ashmole appears. They do an opening prayer. The candidate, Elias, I'm not sure if it happened here, but it happened in other lodges at the time. The candidate had to offer aprons and gloves to the senior member of the lodge. Then was followed a description of the 7 sciences, an explanation of the craft's history, as we have seen in a very mythological way. Then they read the charges of the lodge. Then there was an oath, an obligation with book. They communicated the Mason word, which were the secrets and the grips. And then the dinner continued, the drinks continued, and they finished off the catechisms and the closing prayer. And now I want to ask you something. When you were made a Mason, what did you get? You probably get your regalia, your apron, your gloves. And when we have a new entered apprentice, we give the entered apprentice a copy of the ritual, and probably so do you as well. And you know what happened here? They did so as well. This is the structure of the document. The opening prayer is in the manuscript, the description of the 7 sciences, the craft history, the reading of the charges. So if you want to read a very early Masonic ritual, you can later click the link in the comment section of the slides. I really would love to perform this one day in a pub. Maybe we should shorten the manuscript a little bit, but that's the first way of initiating men into Masonry and women into Masonry. We found early catechisms where the obligation part is described, and they say already that he or she who is to be made a Mason put the hand over the book, and this is even prior to the foundation of the Premier Grand Lodge in London. So this is something we should clearly celebrate one day. Short summary list. We add legends about Christian Rosenkreuz to it because it was a theme or big topic of the time. People were starting to search a secret fraternity, and if we are honest, the secrecy is still kind of a big part of our brand identity, even though there might be no secret or whatever, or however you view it. This joined the image about Freemasonry very soon. So this is the internal part, and here's the external part already. And other external interests of the time merged into it as well. For example, Jewish life wasn't tolerated at all in the UK until 1656. Yeah. So, but when it came back, immediately the interest spiked. I will show you the engram viewer in a bit with Google interests. So stuff like the Kabbalah and other things came back, or also Christian Kabbalah was viewed in a different way. Same goes for the Solomon's Temple topic. Yeah, Newton went completely nuts about it. So did Desaguliers later in the Premier Grand Lodge, as we will see in a bit. Further, there was not just the topic about Solomon's Temple. What was really a big thing was the legend about the vault under the temple. So it was initially just a cave and something like this, then it became a vault. I put you a nice paper in the comment section where you can follow the primary sources about the legend of the vault. And this was kind of hidden knowledge below Solomon's temple, so complete fit to the Renaissance state of mind. And in the early Masonic rituals, nowadays what's in the vault, I won't teaser too much here, as I don't know what degrees we are in. Nowadays it's rather a word we find there. What we think was meant in the early rituals wasn't just a word. it was actually the stone Yahweh threw into the chaos to start creation. So this is a beautiful image. It's somehow lost in most rituals. But we've seen it in the old Royal Arch, in the early Scottish masters in Germany, and the Scottish master or perfect master in France, which seem to share a common ancestor. And this could be a catechism read in a pub in London. We just follow this at the moment. So here just to show you the timings, yeah. The red one is interest in Solomon, yeah, quite high when Jewish life came back. The green one is interest about 1 second. I have to put in the green the green one, the blue one is interest in the term Jewish, yeah. So you see a big spike around 1690. Please keep this in mind. And so the temple topic is something interesting. I added the temple topic here, so it's much higher interest in the word temple than Jewish and Solomon combined. And you see when Freemasonry started, the interest in the word temple just went completely nuts. Yeah, it piked and still peaks and still peaking. And look at this. We had, I go 2 slides back. 1 second. We had here a spike in interest in Jewish life as Jewish came back to the UK. And now look at this external account about Freemasonry, about the Mason word from 1691, 1692, Scottish Reverend Robert Kirk. He views Masonry suddenly as Christian Kabbalah. Yeah, this is something that clearly wasn't in place when the Regius poem was written or the Cook manuscript was written, because Reuchlin, who founded Christian Kabbalah, published his writings end of the 15th century. So Regius and Cook certainly predate Christian Kabbalah, and here suddenly Masonry was linked to Christian Kabbalah. Kabbalah basically is a speculation about God's name, if you want, and his qualities and his emanation in the world, and so on. And basically the way how we give the names of the 2 pillars today, some gives the secret vowels, the other one the consonants, is Kabbalistic, and here suddenly Masonry is viewed as Kabbalah. So clearly new interest merged in. Also themes of knighthood were absolutely key during the time. We have the sword and trouble theme, which is new from Nehemiah when they built the second temple. Probably you know this part of the Bible. In the right hand, they described with the Masonic working tools. In the left hand, they had the sword to protect the building of the temple against enemies and so on. Some of you will immediately know some degrees where this is still practiced. Yeah. And here I just put the Google Ngram viewer again. Interest in knight. Yes, when Masonry started a bit and then it piked in the UK. But now let's check it in France. They were a bit more after knighthood degrees, as you can see. Peak 1730, Masonry. Normally when you have a peak in literature, it took 5 or 10 years and then you have a peak in Masonry about such a topic when it was entered. So first it needed to be published and then they wanted to practice it, of course. And that's just to finish this up, when we speak about the social surroundings, you don't have to read all this, no worries. But club life was a big thing, yeah? We didn't have televisions, there was no electricity, no smartphones, no Zoom calls to chat with your friends. But what you could have done back then in London was you may want to join the club learning mathematics together while drinking and socializing for collective improvement. And before learning mathematics, they were learning French. Or you may want to become a member or a brother, the president of a beekeeping club. Yeah, they were talking about the movement of their hives and had quarterly dinners of fish and bread. It sounds nice as well, doesn't it? Or you may want to become part of the Ancient and Honorable Tuesday Club with mock heroic satirical accounts, songs and ceremonies. Or you may want to become a member of the other 20,000 clubs back then in England for all kind of interests and topics. Quite similar to what later became Freemasonry, too, surprisingly. So here, club interest. Freemasonry was founded. The Constitution says 1717. The research nowadays says 1721. But what we can say, club like Freemasonry appeared on the scene during the peak of club systems in literature as well. So how did this happen? When we look into London, it's when we ask why London and why not anywhere else, I think it's quite clear. Because in London, something strange happened. At 1666, in a bakery, a big fire broke out. And almost all medieval buildings were destroyed. Nothing was standing anymore. And they had to be rebuilt. And to rebuild them, they put taxes on the coal that was traded on the River Thames. And they kept these taxes up for 50 years. So they stopped collecting taxes. They stopped rebuilding the city in 1716. And somehow this is the mythological account of the foundation of the Premier Grand Lodge as well. Yeah, a year later, but new research found out that some of the pubs mentioned there didn't exist at the time. But anyway, what happened here? Yeah, St. Paul's was open 1710, for example. What happened here? The lodges came from everywhere. The Masons came from everywhere. They came from the Netherlands, but mainly from Scotland, with this institutionalized system of Freemasonry already, with swords like Rosicrucianism and Kabbalah linked to it already, as we have seen. So this is all prior to the foundation of the Grand Lodge. What happened is that all this met the interests of the time. Interest in Solomon's Temple, interest in the extensive British club culture. And now people say, okay, the operative lodges changed and became speculative lodges. I'm not entirely sure about this. But what I can see when I look at the facts, I can see the birth of a club-like system of Freemasonry where gentlemen were sitting in pubs and perceived themselves within the lineage of the old legendary stonemasons. So it's possible that they borrowed just their rituals and perceived themselves in the history and started the club-like system of Freemasonry. And here something important happened with regard to all later degrees. Yeah, they gave themselves constitutions written by Anderson, and there was a secret co-author to it, Desaguliers, as we know nowadays. Who was Desaguliers? He's not William Shaw. William Shaw was a man of the late Renaissance in Scotland. Desaguliers is already a man of the middle between Renaissance and early Enlightenment. You see it on the right side here. He wrote thousands and thousands of pages about experimental philosophy, which is called nowadays natural science. At the same time, he wrote a poem about the Newtonian system of the world as a model of government. Yeah, what a time to be alive. He was interested in science and many, many experimental things. He became a member of the Royal Society, recommended by Newton himself. And what we know is that he's almost certainly the father of the new Master Mason's degree, which appeared back then in London. Yeah, here you have a great biography about him, definitely worth a read. And this is a paper, you find it in the comment section as well, about the creation of the third degree, where Brother Powell asked the question, who if not Desaguliers? And we, almost everyone I know agrees on this. What did he do? And now it gets interesting. In the Master Mason's degree, before there was basically just the fellow craft degree, or the ritual. Yeah, some lodges had a master degree, but it didn't had a ritual and so on. I won't go into these details. But what Desaguliers did is he created a kind of new degree where the candidate experienced a legend firsthand. So this is this classical Orphean initiation theme of going to the underworld, crossing the bridge, and then raising to new light, deeper perception. I won't go into details, as maybe not everyone is a Master Mason who will hear this lecture. If this was there before, we don't have real traces for it, but probably got somewhere, he got somewhere the inspiration for it. I don't know if it was the building lodge culture, but obviously he created something new of it. Because what happened here, before you have seen the whole Christian salvation history, Noah, other guys, Noah, Zerubbabel, Cyrus, and so on, appeared in the Masonic legends. What he did, he merged all this. He made it more practical, that you understand it better, or he loved the story too much. I don't know his motivation. But what I know is the outcome, and that's the Master Mason decree we see in Samuel Pritchard's Masonry Dissected. He standardized this big, old, rich building lodge culture towards one main mythological topic or character, and that's the Solomon's Temple and Hiram. And what happened at the same time, a lot of the old stories, they didn't become part of the new craft system of Freemasonry. They were left out. But at the same time, I think not intended, he created this great new framework with this Ophian initiation where a candidate experienced it firsthand, and thereby opened already the space up. Yeah, basically just think about it. You replace the legend, maybe you decorate the lodge a bit differently, and you have something else, don't you? Yeah. Here's a counterexample. Master Mason just Hiram, Solomon's Temple. This is all content of the Graham manuscript, put together 1726. It's basically the old master builder's lineage through the whole of Christian salvation history. It starts with Bezaleel. This is the guy who built up the tabernacle. How is it called in English? The Ark of the Covenant, or how is it called in English? So he received a building plan by the divine and realized this plan here on earth, of course, with his own creativity and with a bit of freedom. The same did Noah. Yeah, Noah received a building plan and he built the ark in his own measures as well. And the same did Hiram later and all the others. That's the master builder's lineage. They all converted uranometry, the heavenly measures, what they thought they or believed, what they see there, to geometry, to measurements of the earth. That's the Deus me incl team of the later Scottish Rite 33 degree, which says basically God's and your own right. And I think this is an initial idea of the lodge, of the old lodges. So what do we read here about Bezaleel? Yeah, it says he died one day. And when he died, he wanted to have written on his gravestone, here lies the flower of masonry, here lies the heart that all secrets could conceal, here lies the tongue that never did reveal. So obviously someone wanted to have a secret from him. When Noah died, the sons tried to raise him with the points of fellowship. We now know them from the Master Mason's degree. If you ever ask yourself why they called points of fellowship and not points of mastership, yeah, of course, they were part of the Fellowcrafts degree. There was no Master Mason degree when they originated, and they never renamed them. And Hiram, instead, in the old tradition here, was just a side note, to be honest. And then Desaguliers came and combined and merged all this towards Solomon's Temple and Hiram. How would make this you feel? I phrased the question like this. Yeah? Because normally what was Masonry, they were sitting in their pubs and reading catechisms, with a little bit surrounding, as we've seen with Elias Ashmole. What would you do if they suddenly do not read your favorite story or catechism anymore in your pub? Yeah? How would your pint taste without Bezaleel or Zerubbabel? Your fish and chips, would it still be the same without Noah in your catechisms? I think not. And I can tell you what you would do. First thing is you would get mad. Look at this. The holy penman, Dr. Desaguliers, make this Hiram a jack of all trades. He make him a silversmith, an ironmonger, a stonecutter, a timber merchant, a sawyer carpenter, and so on. And nowhere in the Book of Kings he appears like this. So someone got really mad about what happened here within the Premier Grand Lodge. And this is even not a reaction to the master degree. This is just a reaction to the constitution, where Desaguliers and Anderson slowly started to merge things towards Hiram. And that's the Briscoe pamphlet, and it gives you a mock constitution at the beginning, but of course it puts in some of the legends that were present at this time in London as well. So what we can see, people were not really happy that some of the old stuff was left out, or that the focus was put so much on Hiram. And there's another interesting note on it. I just want to show it to you. The Rosicrucians, yeah, rather satirical account by the brother who wrote this. The Rosicrucians are viewed as brothers of the same fraternity as the Masons. So we don't have this little poem uh, from, we don't have just this little poem from Scotland, 1638. We also have an account about the Rosicrucians, somehow linked to Masonry, uh, at the beginning of the Premier Grand Lodge in London. So this story was still around in London, or was as well around in London when Masonry was founded, that the Rosicrucians somehow had something to do, or could somehow have something to do with the Masons. But of course, this is rather a satirical account, but I want to show you that it doesn't come out of nowhere what happened later. So first you get mad, and then you sit down, and then probably you take the new framework provided by Desaguliers, non-intentionally, and you create your new and additional degrees. Because that's the motivation for most of the degrees that popped up later. You have craft degrees that tell you Solomon's story, or that happened during this time within the Christian salvation history, yes, first temple degrees. But maybe you want a second temple or other degrees as well. So this is one motivation to create further additional stories. Furthermore, you may want to elaborate on specific content pieces. Let's say something bad happens in the master degree, and when you want to go after the guys who did it, probably a motivation to create a degree back then. And this is a motivation I want to look in now. Is you find it just in the very early days, and I find it just in one system, to be honest. You want to protect and keep your alternative stories which were left out in the new system of Freemasonry. And that's what we will look into soon. And what we have to keep in mind, before we had this loose lodge culture, catechism in pubs, catechisms in building lodges, now they became part of this beautiful new framework provided by the Premier Grand Lodge. So this is clearly a big improvement in the experience of the candidates. Yeah, they don't get like a confused patchwork carpet normally anymore, where all stories and legends are interlinked. They have degrees for every single story that popped up. So this is something that happened here. That's why I said Desaguliers provided a lot of identity and structure to the new Grand Lodge and to the new club-like system of Freemasonry. And look at this, the Royal Order of Scotland, a very early 2-degree system, and a very clear reaction to the new craft system. I put some quotes out of the degrees here, but I won't teaser anything, and I won't teaser too much, of course. It starts, it consists of 2 degrees. The first one is crazily long and confusing. It's not a beauty, but it's nice, I love it. And I tell you why it looks like, how it looks like today. It starts with, to what intent was the order re-established? And of course they say re-established, yeah? They had to prove their antiquity. But you can see already that it wasn't re-established, as it is a clear reaction to the St. John's degrees of the new Premier Grand Lodge. And the second point is, it dates just back to Robert the Bruce. Yeah, if it was written 100 years before, they clearly wouldn't date it just back to Robert the Bruce, I would say. They would clearly go for Adam or anyone else. So this is already a more secular view on Masonry, as we have in Regius or Cook or the other ones. But the answer is to correct the errors and reform the abuses, which had crept in the 3 degrees of Masonry. So someone wasn't happy here either, probably similar to the Briscoe pamphlet. And what follows is quite interesting. We have 15 sections of different catechisms. And who's there again? Bezalel, Noah, all the other fellows. They are preserved within this degree. And some of the sections are poems, they are rhymed, others not. Like the Regius is rhymed, like the Cook, which is not. So it feels clearly someone created a patchwork carpet to keep these old stories alive, to put them all within 1 degree, and to conservate them somehow within Freemasonry. At least this is my view on the Royal Order of Scotland. So for me, it's clearly a phenomenon in the middle. Its content is old pre-club-like system of Freemasonry. It's a big mixture, patchwork carpet of colorful catechisms, but it's somehow already a bit celebrated within the new framework of the new degrees of the new Grand Lodge. So this is a beautiful phenomenon in the middle. For me, the most beautiful and heartwarming uh, system on earth somehow. When I first experienced it, I heard this catechisms and I immediately linked them. Okay, this is the Graham manuscript. This I know from the early catechism there and that. So it really feels you travel in time when you celebrate the Herodom of Kilwinning degree, but it takes quite hours, yeah, because there are a lot of catechisms in it. And I was shocked when they continued with me and said, "You get the second order now of the Royal Order of Scotland." I thought, "Are they completely nuts? Yeah, I'm totally done already. And now another degree? Are you serious?" And then something followed. What is now the second order? The Knight of the Rosy Cross, and that's actually a very tiny degree. Yeah, it's a short degree. It's not an elaborated degree. It's a rudimentary one. But it's interesting, isn't it? And we have the first trace of it at 1750, but it very likely existed before. At 1750, brethren from Netherlands came to London and requested a Royal Order of Scotland charter for The Hague. And the provincial Grand Master of South Britain, in his 9th year of service, granted the charter, and he signed with Knight of the Rosy Cross, and of course with Herodom of Kilwinning too. So that's the second order, and we found recently a very early ritual that contains already parts of the Rosy Cross around this time as well. Very likely the stuff the present took to The Hague. Now we have something. It was a poem about telling the future, a very folkloric poem in Scotland. It was a bit closer to the Premier Grand Lodge in this mock constitution, and now the Rosy Cross, initially just a symbol of a unifying secret brotherhood, became a symbol within Freemasonry itself. And the Royal Order of Scotland jewel nowadays is so beautiful. Yeah, a seven-folded star with for the 7 eons, inside the 8 for the coming better society, if you want. I won't interpret this here now, but much to tell about it actually. And something happened again, yeah. Just some years later, this little thing became this in France, UK, France. Because in France, a Rose+Croix degree popped up as well. And the French say they invented it. But if you compare it, we have the Rose+Croix degree in UK, which is a really short one, which you can do in between the normal degree and having dinner. And in French, you have such an elaborated content already. And if you look at the time scale, the first occurrence of the French Rose+Croix is a Masonic diploma, where a guy signs it with Chevalier d'Orient, Knight of the East, and Rose+Croix. And that's 1757. Then there was a treasure hunt between Lyon and Metz. Those were the high degree centers in France. They had already degrees for every piece of the salvation history, if you want. Yeah, so very elaborated systems of Freemasonry already. And Villarmont from Lyon states as his final degree, Chevalier de Pélican, Chevalier de Saint-André, or Mason de Herodon. So this is a Rose+Croix degree. And Metz actually replies and says, "Oh, this might be our 21st degree, the Grand Élu." But nowadays we know, no, the Grand Élu was rather a Kadosh degree. And here we have already the French version of the Rose+Croix degree. And the third occurrence is actually the first ritual from 1763, where you've just seen some screenshots from. So I ask myself what happened here, because the degree is completely different from its content, but it has too many similarities to be not somehow linked. Yeah, I put some down. We have the name and the symbol. Yeah, UK was at least 7, rather 10 years earlier than France. The word is identical. Yeah, we have the reference to Herodom, we have the name of officers, and we have other points I can't tell here. So I think it's a different degree, but with similarities, and with too many similarities to say no, they're not linked at all. So what happened is, in my eyes, this rudimentary Royal Order of Scotland degree was enough back then in the UK. It was a little top up for the Royal Order of Scotland. And when they were admitted as Rosicrucian Knights, it was the Rosicrucian legends and swords were so strong in the UK, it was enough to create all the connotations the candidates need to inspire them and to know in what meaning they were initiated. In France, on the other hand, we didn't had this Rosicrucian big stand as it was in UK and Germany. It rather came later to France. And furthermore, in France, we had already separate degrees for all these little sections which were combined in the first order of the Royal Order of Scotland. So if you are a French Freemason in Metz, yeah, if you celebrate a ritual selection like this, and then you find a degree which is called Herodom of Kilwinning, which is really early, and that still contains this mixed catechisms, nothing separated yet, rather a patchwork carpet still. So I think you look at it and say, okay, I can't use this. This is nothing. We have already separate degrees for this, what's written here. And then maybe they found a second degree and thought, okay, this is tiny. There's almost no content inside. So what I think what happened, very likely, is that we created just something new based on the structure of both orders of the Royal Order of Scotland. And this eventually became the French Rosicrucian degree, the French Rose+Croix, which now paints a picture of a beautiful native and direct Christianity. If you ever read Voltaire, you feel the initial French Rose+Croix degree a lot. This is certainly the interest of the time. For me, the French one was inspired by the rudimentary two orders of the Royal Order of Scotland. And very soon the French Rose+Croix became the ne plus ultra in Masonry, the nothing beyond, the highest possible degree, because it's the dedicated new law degree. And by this, it was the end of the Christian salvation history. When you look at the timeline I presented initially, starting by Adam, followed by Noah and the others, first temple, second temple, and the birth of Christ. So many new content appeared, and even the pelican. And with the pelican, I told you I will kind of finish off, yeah? I was wondering how the pelican became a symbol in Freemasonry, but because when I hear pelican, I think of this guy. Do you know him? He's trying to eat the stupid capybara, yeah? But he can't, yeah? Pelican. It's not a pelican, he can't eat it. But he goes nuts, yeah? What a stupid bird, if you ask me, yeah? And the most interesting thing is, the pelican actually became a symbol in mythology because of its stupid eating habits. Yeah, look at this little pelican chick. It goes into the beak of the mother to eat the fish she's storing here in the sack. And you know what happens when the fish is empty, when there's no fish anymore? The little pelican chick goes out and said, I want more, I want more, I want more. But the little pelican chick can't speak because it doesn't have a language. What it does, it starts pecking the chest of her mother. That's what you see here on the back. So the chest turns kind of brown, red, and the little pelican chick picks the chest of the mother, give me more, give me more, give me more fish. And at the same time, the beak of many kinds of pelicans turns red during time of breeding. And this was interlinked in mythology. So the first story basically goes, during times of famine, the mother pelican opens her breast, opens her chest, and feeds the little pelican with her own blood. So a big symbol of maternal love, a big symbol of self-sacrifice, already quite close to Christianity. But that's not all about the story. Yeah, it continued. 2nd century. It continues that the young ones, when they grow, they start to rebel against the father, and the father gets mad and kills them. But what happens? The mother returns to the nest 3 days later, sits on the dead birds, pours her blood over them, revives them, and feeds them with her blood. So that's already a clear Christian theme. When I share my slides later, you will see much more slides than I've added to this presentation. Yeah, you find this in Dante's Divine Comedy as well. You will have a slide about Shakespeare, how he used it. But for today, I would just want to show this one again about Thomas, the father of the church. He says, Lord Jesus, good pelican, clean me the unclean with your blood, one drop of which can heal the entire world of all its sins. So what a symbol for a new law degree. And it did alchemy as well. In alchemy, there is actually a bottle, a flask named pelican. And the idea behind this, you put your matter inside the bottom of the bottle, you heat it up, the smoke goes up, the bad parts go out here, the dark parts, but the good parts, they drop here and go down again through the wings of the bottle and thereby feed the original matter, but purified. So original matter, smoke goes up, purification, and back into the original matter. So this is a beautiful sword, isn't it? That's symbolic. This is purification par excellence. What a symbol. And of course, this make it into Freemasonry. And unconditional maternal love, self-sacrifice, rebirth, purification, renewal. I don't have to link this to Christianity in order to make you understand how this degree became the new law degree of Freemasonry. And look at the apron. This is end of the 18th century. How many symbols we have here suddenly in this degree. The crown of thorns, the grail and the Ouroboros. Look at this 11 roses below the pelican. I think the pelican means the 12th rose, or the candidate was seen as the 12th rose or apostle. So this would be a theme which we have nowadays in some of the Knights Templar degrees. Probably the original owner has viewed it in a very similar way. Then we have the pelican itself, and above we have the cross and new wheel, so probably the heavenly Jerusalem, because the old wheel was of course torn apart before, when we look into the salvation history. I was able to date this apron to end of the 18th century because it's a perfect fit with the Masonic alphabet in Rituels de Rite Française, when the Grand Orient accepted the Rose+Croix degree as ne plus ultra of its system. In the original rituals from 1763, we have 3 alphabets, and this one is actually a mixture out of all of them. So the French Rose+Croix became the end of Freemasonry back then for a while, because it was the end of salvation history, and that's the system the Grand Orient adopted. And I used this and not one of the confusing ones from Metz and Lyon to illustrate of what we talk today. Yeah, we have here Solomon's Temple, Premier Grand Lodge stuff, Desaguliers. Then maybe something bad happened in the master degree and someone got mad about the guys who got the bad stuff, so they continued the story, and that's the Elu degree, where they, yeah, I don't want to go into much details. Then we have the legend of the vault we spoke about. Then we have the sword and trouble theme, the knighthood, and to finish all this off, there came the Rose+Croix. So this is a 70-degree system that appeared at many places, also in some German orders, just in a different way. And there's something special about the apron. Look what I found on the apron as well. I don't know what it is. I have a theory. I have to follow it a bit more, maybe in the next lecture. So we have this timeline when we follow the Rosy Cross. I was in Freemasonry. It started with a little poem, folklore. Then we have the interest in North England, so not far away from Scotland, by Elias Ashmole. Probably he was attracted by the Rosicrucians and thought he found something similar, or at least something hermetic inside the Masonic lodges. Then we have a rather satirical hind in London, and some years later it appeared within Freemasonry in a very rudimentary degree. In France, they probably couldn't use these rudimentary degrees, as they had already a more elaborated system of Freemasonry with separate degrees per story. So they created something beautifully and amazingly new out of it. This came into the colonies, and in Jamaica it was translated into English, became part of the Franken manuscript, and eventually it ended up in the USA as the 18th degree of the New Scottish Rite, with its now 33 degrees, still one of the most successful system, oh, wrong side, of Freemasonry. And just to clarify some things before we finish all this stuff off, I spoke a lot about Rosicrucians today. Did I say they are the same as Freemasons? No, not. They are a term in literature. They became a symbol of a secret brotherhood. And in folklore, they were connected with the Mason word. And then we had a very early degree. I put a bit of the oath here because the secrets follow after the oath. So I don't tell any secrets here. But that's what you promised, yeah, that you keep all secrets, all 90 secrets I may now receive, and that I never will speak or give to mortal day or night, except unto a Rosicrucian knight. Little thoughts about Rosicrucians within Freemasonry itself. Latest 70-50, rather 70-40 or earlier, and then France followed. Also, I got the question, did the Scottish Rite originate from the Royal Order of Scotland? Because the name is quite similar. No, the Scottish Rite originated from a big degree collection. Yeah, this had many sources. And this big degree collection already contained a much more elaborated and different French Rose+Croix degree. So there's a gap between the Royal Order of Scotland and the Scottish Rite. But of course, I think that the French Rose+Croix degree, and there I see the connection, was inspired by the Royal Order of Scotland, by the earlier and rudimentary UK version of it. The big degree collections, something that became eventually the Scottish Rite, or when I said that France had already a more elaborated Freemasonry than we find in the ROS, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's the Baillot manuscript. Probably a father or distant cousin of the Royal Order of Scotland, and became the Franken manuscript and the Scottish Rite. Here we have even Martinus degrees inside, and so not just stuff that became the Scottish Rite, and very bad knowledge of Hebrew language. A friend of mine, my neighbor, is a Mason too. He speaks Hebrew very well, and he checked all the names and the Kabbalistic stuff is in the Scottish Rite, and he got a bit mad and said, why did they not manage within hundreds of years to show all the stuff to a native speaker or to a Jew? And so he's a bit right. They got a bit very creative in writing the names and make up some numbers, but nevertheless, it's a beautiful system. So the Scottish Rite, based on the 4 to 25th of the Franken manuscript, founded actually in Charleston, South Carolina, now with 33 degrees, and some of the early degrees, they literally just consisted of their names, so still a beautiful Scottish mass. A funny thing, when the Scottish Rite was founded, I looked into the ritual of 1805, the Rose+Croix was still the ne plus ultra of Freemasonry. They say it's the nothing beyond of Freemasonry, even though it was just the 18th degree of the 33 degrees anymore. So maybe they felt it goes downwards afterwards again. Of course, I'm kidding. That's something to look in some of the later things. Albert Pike has changed. So basically, he stole the ne plus ultra from Freemasonry when he worked on the rituals with Mackey and others. 1855, here you see the Kadosh became the new ne plus ultra. That's one reason I don't like Albert Pike, because I love the Rose+Croix degree, and the other thing is because he was a racist par excellence. In the Memphis Rite, we've seen also new perspectives dropped in. Yeah, here we have a complete alchemical interpretation of the word of the degree. I pointed it out because I won't tease it here. It's suddenly linked to the tria prima, to the primary matters of alchemy: salt, sulfur, and mercury. Salt for the foam, sulfur for the fire, and mercury as a fluid principle. They thought everything consists of these three elements. Also, they say in Hebrew we could translate the word to water, fire, air, and earth, and this is also a very creative use of the Hebrew language, as my brother and neighbor here told me. Very early, Kabbalah was linked to the degree as well. uh, fits perfectly. We have the tetragrammaton already, maybe from other degrees. And this was converted into the pentagrammaton, to the points of cross. Yeah, when you put the letter shin in the middle, in the heart, it's the flame. It looks like a candle. You get actually Yeshua, so Jesus. When you just add the shin letter to the tetragrammaton, this goes back to Reuchlin, 1494. So that's why I said Kabbalah isn't initially Masonic, even though it's linked very often, but it predates clearly some of our manuscripts. And this is a lodge in Frankfurt. A brother transcribed all this recently. And here we have it clearly in the Masonic Rosicrucian lots in the early in Germany. And I want to finish off with the one and only Annie Besant, of course. I love her a bit. Yeah, she links the French Rose+Croix degree back to the guy who made up all the legends, or who is the hero of all the legends, Christian Rosenkreuz himself. So this didn't happen before, actually, that he was named within the degrees, I think. This is the first occurrence of Christian Rosenkreuz. Even they were all inspired by him or by the stories around him. That's the first time he appears here. And do you know why I love this so much? It's the way she does it. She doesn't need to say anymore, Christian Rosenkreuz founded this order, as the Royal Order did. Yeah, Robert Bruce founded us. She didn't have to do this. She didn't have to make up a story. She says openly, the meaning that we assign to this degree goes back to Christian Rosenkreuz. She doesn't make up a legend. She doesn't make up a story. She assigns a proper meaning to the degree, because we are free to do so. There's just one single authority in tradition and in rituals, and this is the saying, my grandmother and my grandfather did it that way. And they said my grandfather and grandmother did it that way already. That's the single authority you have in rituals. So you are free to assign any meaning to them. We are free to do so if it let us grow deeper into the world, if we get a better perspective and a deeper perception of the world by doing so. And that's why I love Annie Besant's way to handle this degree so much here. And this doesn't mean that we don't take this serious anymore, but she says that we perpetuate it under this knightly order. We take it up, we keep it up under this knightly order. And that's what I really love and what inspires me, the way she handles and works with the Masonic degrees. Thanks for your attention. It's still one of my most favorite systems. Rosicrucianism is always about creating unity in a more and more fragmented world. I've shown today how the symbol entered Freemasonry, and it's still our task, especially as Rosicrucian knights, but also as entered apprentices, to keep up the unity in the world and to fight for it every day. So ask yourself, maybe in the morning, meditate a bit, how can I find unity within myself? Ask you in the evening, how did my actions and interactions support unity, or didn't they? If you find any problems, you have something to work on. But that's, I think, what all this is about. Thanks for your attention. And thereby I'm done. We had a big story. This is the summary. I think in a quiet moment you can look at this again, and you will be easily able to put degree names next to these little topics and pieces of puzzle I put here together today. It's not a finite list. It's rather just part of the puzzle, but for me those are the main trends I needed to tell the story here today. Thank you very much. I stop recording now.